The Prepper Podcast, episode 32.
They've got to know whether or not their president's a crook.
The American people would never vote for socialism. He said, under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program.
The Prepper Podcast is an up-to-date survival podcast based on military, wilderness, and modern-day survival and may be found at thepreparedness.com. I am Ken Jensen, and this is the podcast about everything survival. My goal is to teach you strategies on self-reliance and to develop survival skills and critical thinking in everyone, resulting in a more resilient and more enjoyable life. This is episode 32, and today I think we're going to be discussing my biggest problems with preppers today and how to make your preparedness a fun family activity. The show notes for today may be found at theprepperpodcast.com/032. That's right, that is at theprepperpodcast.com/032. I will have a set of links that are associated with this on my a link to about 5 different blog posts that I've made so that you can see some related posts to that. Now for the housekeeping, be sure to visit my Zello page. Once again, that would be theprepperpodcast.com/Zello. And you can download the Zello app from the iPhone App Store or the Android Play Store for free. And what it is it's like a walkie-talkie feature, like the old Nextel phones where you hear the beep and then they talk and then it beeps again whenever they're done. So it's like a walkie-talkie feature for your smartphone. The cool thing about this is it's a social thing around the walkie-talkie feature, and you're talking to people all over the world and all over the country instead of just the people that you know. You have to have the app enabled to do that. All right. So the cool thing about that is no one can just give you, no one can just talk to you whenever you're not on the app. So you turn off the app, you turn off the walkie-talkie feature, which is something I don't think the Nextel phones ever did. Zello has become much better, much more popular than the Nextel phones because of its ability to go on all phones, and you don't have to get stuck with one type of phone just to have a walkie-talkie feature. So, and it has a social thing around it as well. You can set up profiles. You can change people's audio. So if you have somebody that comes on really loud, somebody that comes on really quiet, you can change the volume for that particular person every single time. If you change it once, they will automatically show up at that volume for you from then on until you change that volume level again, which is really cool and that's something that the Nextel phones never had. All right, so it has a memory that it will remember the volume of the people that you talk to in the groups. Well, if you go to my Zello page, and there will be a link, if you go to my Zello page, you can also find my channel, and I implore all of you to go to that page and to connect with each other, and I try my hardest to get on there all the time, okay? Usually it's at odd hours. I'll tell you right now, a lot of times I'm on there between, and we're going to talk Central Time since I'm Central, okay? But I get there between about 3:30 a.m. and 5 a.m., okay? So there's about an hour and a half there. 3:30 a.m. and 5 a.m. I'm usually on there. And then, let's see. And these are weekdays I'm talking about here, okay? And then I'm on there again probably from 3:30 or 4 p.m. till about 5 or 6 p.m., okay? So those are times that I am almost always on there listening to the channel to see if anybody wants to chime in. So if you want to connect with me, your best bet is really early in the morning when most of you probably aren't going to want to wake up, but from about 3:30 to 5 in the morning, and let's say about 3:30 to 6 in the evening. It's going to be sometime in between that time, okay? I'm not saying that I'm always on there at exactly 3:30 and I'm always off at exactly 5 or 6 or whatever, okay? So just understand that even though I said I'm usually on around that time, does not mean that those numbers are hard. Now, let's move on. I have officially proven that time travel is possible. A nerdy thing to bring up in a preparedness podcast, I understand, but I have officially proven that time travel is possible. How, you ask, is time travel possible? Well, today was recorded a week in advance. That's right. You're listening to me. Actually, normally I do these podcasts almost a week in advance, so this is actually almost 2 weeks in advance. You are listening to a podcast that was recorded way in advance. Why was it recorded way in advance? Because I am currently in training. That's right. If you're listening to this when it comes out, there's a good chance that I am not doing a podcast. I am not at home. I am actually with James Yeager of tacticalresponse.com. I am doing training with James Yeager of tacticalresponse.com. And that is the guy in Tennessee that got his guns taken away once. And that is the guy in Tennessee that went out to Clive Bundy's ranch and was in the resistance that was going against the government and stuff like that. So that's where I will be. I will be doing combat training there. So if you are listening to this, I'm a time traveler. I've traveled 2 weeks into the future. Now for the news. This is very delayed news. I meant to put it on the last podcast, but I missed it in the intro because I've been dealing with my throat. I have a lot of really bad throat issues right now because we had a cold snap in the middle of May, and it's really messed up my throat. So I'm lucky that I'm even doing these podcasts, and let's be honest now, you're lucky for being able to hear me. So I did not get to this news last week, which was about 5 minutes ago for me, but I did not get to this news. The Department of Agriculture has bought, or sorry, I shouldn't say that. They haven't bought. They are trying to buy Class 3A ballistic vests and .40 caliber Smith & Wesson rifles, okay? Now, let me pause for a second because I need to get my thoughts together. Let's see. The Department of Agriculture buying these vests and .40 cal Smith & Wessons. What the crap? Why in the world is the Department of Agriculture buying weapons? Why are they buying ballistic vests? It's the Department of Agriculture. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give you a link to the Washington Times, okay, publication. And I'm going to read just a small amount of that. And there is a video on their publication. The title of the video is Department of Agriculture Orders Submachine Guns Solicitation. All right, that's the title of the video. And the title of the actual report is Agriculture Department Puts in Request to Buy Body Armor. And it reads something like this. I'm going to skip around because I think when I read stuff, it's boring. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has put in an acquisition request to buy body armor, specifically ballistic vests compliant with NIJ 0101.06 for Level 3A ballistic resistance of body armor, the solicitation stated. The request was put in writing and posted on May 7th, just for a few days before the same agency sought the commercial acquisition of submachine guns equipped for 30-round magazines. Did you hear that? They put in a request in writing to buy ballistic vests. And a few days later, They requested to buy commercial acquisition of submachine guns. I'll leave that at that, just so that you guys can kind of sleep on that. Also on their post, the Washington Times says, earlier this year, the U.S. Postal Service requested the go-ahead to buy assorted small arms ammunition via website posting. A year ago, Social Security Administration put in a request for 174,000 rounds, what the agency described as .357 SIG 125 grain bonded jacketed hollow points. And the Department of Homeland Security raised eyebrows with its recent request for 450 million rounds. At about the same time, the FBI asked for 100 million hollow point rounds. On top of that, the Department of Agriculture itself sought 320,000 rounds within the last year or so. The Department of Agriculture is seeking weaponry and ballistic vests. That is it for the news. I will post a link to the Washington Times post where you can watch a video that also entails a little bit about all that. So now that we are done with the housekeeping and the news, let me get into today's discussion. You know, my biggest problem with preppers today, one of my biggest problems with preppers is the do-it-yourself attitude. Now, I don't have any problem with the do-it-yourself attitude as far as like getting things done, getting out there and figuring out how to build things and learn new skills. That's awesome. But the problem that I have is the fact that they think that they're the only ones that can do something for themselves. Well, I have a little bit of news for you. Today's discussion is going to be how you can make things a family project. So the push your kids out of the way, and I'm kind of I kind of have this problem as well. I'll be doing something with my son for a project, and I'm like, oh, okay, you know what? Just back up. Let me take care of this, and I'll fix it for you or whatever. And that is the wrong thing to do. The do-it-yourself attitude, pushing people aside and doing it yourself. If you want something done right, do it yourself. That is a big problem with me. I don't like it. I think that is just a cop-out, and people are going to overextend themselves if they're that way. And also the fact that Teotihuacan, the end of the world as we know it, will happen today. I just talked about news about the ballistics and so let's think about this. I'm sure that somebody out there is saying, oh, it's the end of the world as we know it, and the Department of Agriculture is buying weaponry, and they're buying ballistic vests, and they're coming after you, and women and children are going to be crying in the streets, and dogs and cats are going to be having sex and having puppy kittens, and all this other stuff, and the end of the world is going to happen today because they're buying vests. Well, the problem is that attitude is one of fear, and that is something that I am fighting. The reason why we prep is so that we can eradicate fear, not so that we can be more afraid of everything that's going on. It is understandable to know the news and to know what is going on, but it is another thing to be scared, to be afraid of everything's going to happen and not being able to live your life. Because if you just prep and you don't live life, then guess what? You're not living. Let me repeat that. If you're not living life, you're not living. It seems pretty obvious. It's common sense. But so many people ruin their lives, and on their deathbed, they just realize that they wish they would have done more with their family, with their loved ones, and they would have made an impact. No, I don't mean that they would have made a mass global scale impact. I mean that they wish they had time to make a localized impact with their family, with their spouses, their children. So that is kind of what leads me into today's topic. We want to make things a family fun activity. So let's talk about, since I was talking about it, let's talk about some of the traps that preppers fall into. The number one trap that preppers fall into is the acquisition of stuff. The problem with stuff is whenever you acquire stuff, you have to maintain stuff. So it becomes that every bit of things that you acquire that is supposed to make your life better actually requires more of your time to maintain it. So you end up, your stuff is running you instead of you running your stuff. So it's great to acquire things. It's great to have things. But the problem is every time that you have something, you have to have some kind of maintenance plan for it, and it's going to take a little bit of your time. There are certain things that they're worth the maintenance that they require, and that's the stuff that you want to have. But other things just aren't worth it. They're just certain things that just aren't worth your time. So we run into the trap of acquiring things and thinking that's going to prepare us, and it's not things that's going to prepare us. It's skills, and it's critical thinking. So if you're just acquiring a bunch of stuff, you may make it a little while, but in the end, you're going to lose everything that you have, and you're really not going to make it if the quote-unquote end of the world scenario actually happens. So let's be more about doing all of our projects and preparedness with our family and enjoying life with our family instead of just falling into the trap of buying a bunch of stuff. Another trap that we fall into is an improper attitude. You want to have bulk storage instead of just good food. So you store what you eat what you store, but the problem is what you're storing is crap. All right, and even in my 1-year preparedness course that I have built, my 1-year preparedness system, I have a lot of copy canning and stuff like that, which that kind of food is not great for you, okay? We all understand that canned food is not the best food in the world, but it stays. It's good. So, but what I'm talking about is, number one, you don't need a bunch of Twinkies and candy bars and stuff like that. Spam, that's freaking, no, that's not going to happen. I would rather have canned chicken over Spam any day. And not that I didn't like Spam. Growing up as a kid, I loved grilled Spam sandwiches. And if any of you have anything against Spam, you're going to think that sounds disgusting. But I'm telling you, it tasted very, very good. But it is horrible for you. And my parents didn't know that. But I do know that. And my kids will never eat it. All right, so we want good food, not bulk storage. Another thing is you want to go out and buy a whole bunch of freeze-dried food and stuff like that when it's really expensive, and granted, it will give you a higher quality food, but half that food you're not even going to eat. So, I mean, you really have to think about it. And I don't have anything against freeze-dried food. I actually think that freeze-dried food should be part of your preps. I love freeze-dried food, and I have a lot of freeze-dried food. So I'm just telling you, you need to look at your food usage. All right, don't just buy everything in bulk. And what I was talking about with the improper attitude is the fact that you're like, all right, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna buy like 100 pounds of rice and beans, and my kids they're just gonna have to deal with it, man, because I'm trying to get them prepared. I'm going to be the one that saves their lives, and you know what? They can just shut their mouths and eat what I give them because rice and beans are going to keep them alive. Well, that's true, but the thing is if you really care about them, you are going to have more things for them. You're not just going to give them rice and beans. Now, whenever I hounded on Twinkies and candy bars and stuff, I don't deny that I think it would be a great thing for you to have some stashes of cookies and stuff like that for your kids to have snacks and treats on occasion, you know. That kind of stuff is going to boost morale. And don't just buy a bunch of rice and beans and think that you're going to save your family because you bought a thing of rice and beans. That stuff has its place in your preps, but if that's all you're thinking about, you're thinking about it the wrong way, and you're probably not going to make it even still because you've proven that the mindset is not there. And I'm sorry if I offended you, but that's the truth, and that's the way I feel about it. Another thing that preppers fall into is financial ruin. I am big on this. That is why my 1-year preparedness system has a big budget section in it. Financial ruin, because I already talked about it. We acquire a bunch of stuff, okay? When you acquire stuff is expensive. And if you don't watch it, you will go into financial ruin, all right? My yearly plan has a budget where you will budget purchasing of stuff for your preps, okay? And that's what this preparedness plan is. It's a list of all the things that you're going to want to acquire so that you are 1 year prepared. It is not about self-sufficiency, it's about self-reliance, which is the first step to getting yourself into self-sufficiency, okay? This budget is this plan is essentially the first step. It's a big step, but it's a first step to get you 99% prepared for just about anything that's going to happen. That's the whole point of the plan. Now, that's why is it that I make sure that everything is budgeted? The reason why I make sure everything is budgeted is the simple fact that it's expensive and people will get the preparedness bug, they will get the prepper bug, and instantly they go out and they spend an arm and a leg trying to buy all the stuff that they're going to need because, once again, the end of the world will happen today. It's going to happen today, it's going to happen tomorrow, or it's going to happen next week. We don't have time to waste. We don't have time to get all this stuff. We just have to go and get the stuff now. Well, that doesn't really work. You're going to ruin your life that way. All right, I've hounded on it many times before. You do it one step at a time. All right. So, once again, it's not all about hurry up and get stuff for your preps. It's about skill, and it's about family. Now we're going to discuss how to make your prepping a family activity. First, let's go into the food portion of it. Gardening. Gardening is a wonderful family activity. With gardening, you get to plant things and you get to weed the garden. Well, if you bring your kids into the gardening with you, you can let them plant things. You can let them dig little holes and put the seeds in, and you can bring them in to help you pull weeds out of the garden. That's wonderful. What else do you get to do? Well, when your kids go out there with you, they can eat things straight off the plant. That's right. They can eat stuff straight off the plant, and they actually look at it like a treat. I'm not joking. I took my kids out, and they aren't real big. I think they think it's okay, but they're not real big on having broccoli and green beans and stuff like that for dinner, just like every kid is. But when we go out to the garden, no joke, they snapped off a head off of a broccoli plant and they ate it right there without doing anything. They just ate it. And they said, this is really good. So apparently they think it's really cool that they can just eat plants. So they snap it off the plant and they eat it. And there's no cooking to it. So all the nutrients that were in the head of broccoli, all the nutrients are there. All right, everything's still there, and they're getting their vegetables, and they think it's some kind of treat because it grows out of the ground. That's the problem with half the kids that don't eat that kind of stuff, is they don't know where it comes from. You can also teach them about wild edibles in your yard and what it means if you eat the wrong thing, of course. So we have dandelions all over our yard, so much so that our neighbors don't really enjoy that fact. But to be honest with you, I don't want to grow grass because the dandelion and clover and stuff like that are all edible. So if I keep it cut short enough, then it is what it is. But if something ever happened, I could let it all grow out and we could just have a feast out of our front and backyard. All right. Teach them about that. Dandelion fritters are awesome. Okay, dandelion fritters are just great. And, that's the flour, and it's breaded and fried, and I know it's not great for you, but it is good. And people add that to their salads. Just last week, we were talking about, Jay Bradbury went out into his garden and gets his entire salad. Well, you can do the same thing with things out of your yard. No joke. As long as you're not using a bunch of chemicals and you're not a grass freak, then you can actually get this kind of stuff out of your own yard. You just have to know what you can and what you can't eat. And the reason why I brought up what it means if you eat the wrong thing is because children will think, oh yeah, it's a plant, I can eat it. Well, the thing is there are plants that you can't eat. So you have to be very, very careful and explain to your children that there are plants that they cannot eat, and only eat the things that you tell them that they can eat, okay? So make sure that whenever you're teaching them about wild edibles, you explain to them that if they eat the wrong things, they can get sick, they can go to the hospital, or they could die. All right, it's very important that they understand that so they don't just go around eating something and end up eating a pound of poison ivy. That would be a bad thing. That would probably send them straight to the hospital at least. All right, I'm going to pause real quick and clear my throat again because I have had this really nasty dry throat. It's been destroying my voice. It's been heck on me, guys. And it's all because of this cold snap we've been having, and this is the day that I get to record 2 different podcasts. So let me go ahead and pause it real quick. Like I said, the next food item that we can look into is livestock. We can teach them how to feed the livestock. My children collected eggs from our chickens all the time. And the great thing about children collecting the eggs is my children would always get into an area that I couldn't reach. All right, whether it's because I'm big or because I'm old man. You know, at least to them I'm an old man, but I still feel that I'm pretty young. Because I'm an old man, they can always get into these little tiny areas that I can't get into. And trust me, chickens are a lot of times going to lay their eggs in the tiny places that you can't get to. That's the whole point of them laying them there. They don't want you to get to them, but our kids can. So they can collect those wonderful eggs for us. And they loved doing it. And we ate a lot of eggs. And they loved eating the eggs. And now they have this affinity for eating eggs for breakfast, whether it comes from our chickens or not. Even if it came from the farmer's market or grocery store, they love eggs because they know where they come from, and they loved getting the eggs. They can also assist you in herding or paddock shifting. They can help you herd cattle. You got to be careful with that, though, okay, because they can get trampled if they're small children. You may want to just keep them to herding or paddock shifting chickens and stuff like that. You can have them help you move the chicken tractors. They can assist you in moving your livestock where it needs to go for fresh food, and they love doing that. I loved doing it as a kid. I loved being out there with the animals, out there with the cattle and everything else. All right. Now we'll move on to water. The first thing that you can do is teach them to conserve water. What good is accumulating water if they don't know how to conserve it? You can get 5 gallons a day, and if you waste a gallon of it, you only have 4. You can gather 50 gallons a day, but if you're wasteful and you waste 10 of it without even being able to use it, then you only have 40. So acquiring water is one thing, but conserving water is just as important as acquiring it. And you can teach them how to reuse water. If you use something for a shower, you can teach them, in one of your do-it-yourself projects, you can teach them how to collect the water and how to reuse the water for something else. Gray water is really good for a lot of plants. They love the alkaline water. So, beyond teaching them to conserve and reuse water, what is another thing that you can do? You can teach them how to acquire the water. All right? There are a couple no-nonsense ways to acquire water. It is the bathtub. Every time that there's a storm, you can teach them it's time to fill up the bathtub, and you're going to get a good 30 or 40 gallons out of the bathtub. You can teach them to fill that up before every storm, as long as you have a good stopper that's going to keep the water from getting out. So the bathtub is the first one. The next one would be the hot water heater, attaching a hose to the bottom of it and filling stuff up with it. But you're going to make sure that your hot water heater is off for quite some time before you start using that water, because it is really, really hot in that tank. And people can burn themselves really bad. And you're putting it through a rubber hose. And if you put it through a rubber hose and it's really, really hot, there is a chance that you will melt the rubber hose and get hot water everywhere. So you must be very, very careful when you are using water out of the hot water heater. But that is 50 to 60 gallons of water that you can use, and you can teach your children how to acquire that water. Another thing that you can teach your children is how to do rain catchment, how they can collect rainwater off of the roof, and how to use the downspouts and stuff to collect it all into a barrel. You can teach them how to do it in the wilderness as well. In the wilderness, you can teach them how to use a tarp or something to collect rainwater, how to put the tarp below a tree or something like that, because trees acquire tons of rain. It's just the way that they're designed. They have so much where they gather rain. If you put a tarp underneath a tree, you can acquire an almost infinite amount of water because of the way the leaves and everything else are. You can acquire tons of water from putting stuff underneath a tree like that. Another way that they can do it in the wilderness would be like using a steel. What that is basically a dug hole. Well, there are a couple ways of doing a steel. One of them would be a dug hole where you use the evaporation. Remember, guys, I have this nasty throat, so you have to bear with me. You have evaporation of the sun, and then the water comes up on plastic, and it comes down at a single point, and it drips into like a cup or a pot or a pan or something like that. That's one type of steel. Another one would be to put green material into a plastic bag, let the water evaporate off the green material. It's going to collect inside the bag, and it's going to drip down into a cup or a pot or something like that. So there are a couple different ways of doing stills and stuff and getting water. Another one would be ground filtration, never drinking straight out of a stream or something like that. It's better than getting something out of an above ground spring, better than getting something out of that direct stream, even if it's nice and clear, is to dig a hole feet away from the stream until you get down to water. Then you're going to strain the water through like a t-shirt or something like that to get all the big gritty stuff out of the way, all the dirt and stuff that gets trapped in that water. And although the water's not as clean, because the ground will filter all that out, there's a very good chance that a lot of the things that are going to get you sick will be gone out of that water. That's the awesome thing, is the ground can filter water in just a couple feet. It's awesome. That's why sand is such a good additive into a filter. Okay. Another thing you can do is teach them, you can buy some life pens and teach them how to use those. Those are like the life straws. You can use the life straw to suck water straight out of a stream or something like that. It's got like the really, really good filter or whatever. So life straws are a really good thing that you can purchase for your children and teach them how to drink water out of it. And then the most important thing, even though I hadn't gotten to it yet, this is something that I would try to do every time I can, is even if you're getting it through ground filtration, another thing to do, if you can, boil it. You want to boil your water. And you can also use something at home like a Berkey filter or something like that. So even if you're acquiring dirty water, you can put it through a Berkey filter with the charcoal and chemical filtration, and you're going to get all the junk out of the water. And boiling it will get all of the nasty germs and viruses and stuff. It's going to kill everything, but it's not going to get chemicals out. Your Berkey will get the chemicals out. But it's very important that if you're in the wilderness, that you teach your children how to boil water, even if they've gotten it through ground filtration. All right, so let's move on to shelters. Even though it seems kind of no nonsense, it seems kind of common sense, it's really not to a lot of people. So you can teach your spouse and your children how to set up a tent. Yeah, I know it seems basic, and all it is a couple rods and poles and and some stakes to hold it down and a tarp over top of it and stuff like that. But it's still an important skill, and you want to make sure that they know this. It's not just something that they set up by themselves. You want to teach them how to set this up and what you're thinking whenever you're doing it, so that they can do it in the future in crunch time when they really need to. When you're making repairs to your home or anything like that, that's part of shelter, right? When you're making repairs to your home, if you're jerry-rigging something to make it work, include them in what you're doing. I remember being a child and being under the house, and, we weren't wealthy in any way, okay? We were what you would call dirt poor. And one thing that we did, we had a huge busted water line, and my father went underneath the house. I went under there with him, and we went to this busted water line, and we covered it up. We actually, we used an old bicycle inner tube. We cut it up and we wrapped it around it, kind of like you would an ace bandage, just really, really tight. And then we did duct tape over that. And believe it or not, that held for like a year. All right. And that was before we even moved out. That thing lasted until the second we moved out. It was crazy. And like I said, it wasn't that we weren't taking care of the thing. We took care of that house. It's just that we were dirt poor, and going and getting all the material it took to replace that pipe was just something that we couldn't do. But this is the kind of repair that you may have to do when there's actually a situation and you can't get to like a hardware store for a pipe. So when you're making repairs like this, or even when you're jerry-rigging something, include your children in what you're doing and teach them how to do it, so that in the future they can do that kind of stuff too. It's a very, like I would say that I was only about 7 or 8, and this stuck with me up until now. So, I mean, it's stuck with me, 25 years or something like that? I still remember it vividly, just like I was there yesterday. I still remember that kind of stuff. And that's the stuff that your children are going to remember. That's the stuff that your spouse needs to know as well. So when you make repairs, if they're interested, you need to include them in it. Don't force them to do things that they don't like to do, but you need to include them in anything that they're willing to learn. You can teach them to build shelters in the wilderness. You can teach them lean-tos. You can teach them A-frame shelters. Teach them how to build it with different supplies. Teach them how to build the shelters with like tarps and ropes and stuff like that. But also teach them how to do it with sticks and pine boughs and broadleaves and stuff like that. All right, so you need to teach them how to build different shelters in the wilderness. They really enjoy that kind of stuff. I remember that kind of stuff too as well. I mean, most of the stuff that I'm talking about is stuff that I actually remember from my childhood. This is stuff that you can be teaching your children. And when I say your children, understand that every single one of these is like your spouse. But my spouse is actually, she's usually there when I'm doing any of this stuff. So I don't even think about including her in anything, because she is included in everything just by habit. Okay, so when I say children, I mean anybody in your family, but I'm thinking about a lot of this stuff about what I remember as a child. So when I say your children, I mean, I'm going off of memory and stuff like that, okay, guys? So remember to include everybody, but teach them, sorry about that, I bumped the mic, but teach them how to build shelters in the wilderness. And now let's go into security. You can run... You need to teach your children how to dial 911. It's very important that they understand how to dial 911. And they need to understand the severity of dialing 911 when it's not an emergency. That's very important. All these 911 prank calls, they're getting tired of that crap. And, they could actually come after you, the parents, when your children dial 911. Even though they actually expect you to teach your children to dial 911. So you need to teach them to dial 911. You need to teach them when to and when not to dial it as well. And also, in every scenario that's going to happen within your home and stuff like that, fires, storms, things like that, earthquakes, anything, they need to know where they need to go. All right? They should know where to go. You should have an emergency plan in place and tell them exactly where they need to go, what they need to do in case specific things occur. They need to know where they need to get to so that you can all get back together. It's very important. And you also need escape scenarios. I mean, what if you're in your house and you're there because it's the safest place, but all of a sudden it becomes not the safest place? It is no longer the safest place. You need to have a scenario to escape that situation. And there are other things, there are other situations that you could be in that you need to know how to escape. Well, your children need to know all this stuff too. And one way that you can teach them all this stuff is to run drills on all of it. Okay, you can run drills and teach them how to do all this stuff and kind of ingrain it in them, make it second nature to them almost, so that this stuff is just, it becomes common sense. It becomes common knowledge to them to just do this stuff when something occurs. You can teach them about health and sanitation. And I know it's a boring subject, but you can teach them first aid techniques, which I think is a really cool thing for a little kid to know, especially if you have a little daughter that's going to end up, I shouldn't say that. If you have a daughter or son that is going to end up babysitting for money, teaching them first aid techniques will make them a hot commodity. Believe me, we have a couple babysitters, and we will not use a babysitter unless they know mouth-to-mouth and CPR. I want to know that my children can be taken care of just like if I were there. I know that stuff. I want them to know that stuff. And, we will pay them a pretty decent price whenever they watch our children, but they better know these techniques and they better have certification. You can teach them wilderness sanitary etiquette. What in the world is wilderness sanitary etiquette? Well, wilderness sanitary etiquette is simple. It is how to keep people from stepping on your crap in the wilderness, and to keep your crap in the wilderness from affecting anyone else. That's it. It's basic things like you don't want to pee in front of a bunch of people, which you may not care about that kind of thing, but you want to have some etiquette, and you want to care about other people. When you go take a crap in the wilderness, you're going to dig a hole. And you're going to use it in the hole, and you're going to cover it up. And what are you going to use to wipe with to keep yourself clean? You need to understand that. You need to know what to do. You need to know where the toilet paper is in your wilderness bag or your bug out bag. You need to know where the toilet paper is. And if you don't have toilet paper, do you have something you can use? Do you have to use leaves or something like that? Do you have to scrape it with a rock? Believe it or not, that is a technique to use. And if you're going to do that stuff, you need to freaking know the right leaves you're going to choose. You're not going to choose poison ivy. That's bad. And you're not going to choose, a pine cone. You're not going to do that. But whatever you do use, you're going to bury in the hole along with your number 2. Okay? So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about with sanitary etiquette. This is the kind of stuff that's going to keep people healthy and alive. Even though it just seems like, oh yeah, I could go walk 20 feet over there and do my thing and then come back. Yeah, you could do that, but I'm telling you, you're inviting a lot of problems sanitary-wise. You don't want to do that. All right, sanitation is no joke. All right, so you can also go through the contents of your first aid kits. It's important that you go through the contents of your first aid kits anyways. So when you're going through the contents, you can pull out each thing and you can look at the expiration date and you can explain to your kids what that thing is for. So as you're going through your first aid kit so that you can keep it up to date, you're teaching your family why you would use it. And if you have something that you can use over and over again, it's not disposable or anything, then just you can show them how to use it. And if you have something that's disposable but it's kind of cheap, then it's more valuable for them to have the skill to use that equipment than it is for you to save a few bucks or a couple pennies on a Band-Aid or a battle dress or something like that, okay? It's important that they understand how to use that stuff instead of saving a couple bucks. It's very important to teach them the hows of using all of it because it does you no good. What if you're the one who gets hurt and you're incapable of doing these procedures to yourself? Who's stuck doing it? Your family. So it's important that as you go through your first aid kits that you go through the reasons and stuff with your family. Another thing is to teach them about essential oils and the importance of essential oils and what they have to do with your medical kits and the use of essential oils on different ailments and diseases and all kinds of other things. So essential oils are very valuable. We don't just use Western medicine. Western medicine has its place, but I think the essential oils definitely have their place as well. A lot of times you can use these oils to keep things from happening to a level where you're going to require ridiculous medication. And a lot of times these oils have much less side effect to them. Even though they're in a concentrated form, they have less side effect to them than the Western counterparts that you would use. You don't have to have this big long list of things that it may do to you if used incorrectly and things like that. Essential oils are typically a little bit safer, even though they don't say that they're safer. They usually are. And you can teach them about the uses and how they interact with each other and stuff like that, and the importance of being safe with them. Because that's the thing, is you have to know what oil is going to react with what other oil in your body, and you need to know how that's going to affect you. Now we're going to get into like energy. You can teach them to build fires when you're camping. So go out, have fun, go camping with your kids, because this is one of the better things that I think. It's one of the funnest ways of prepping is to go out, camp, and do it without electricity and stuff, and teach your children how to build fires. Teach them how to use tinder and how to use, different kinds of wood and stuff for kindling, and what a fuzz stick is, things like that. You can teach them all kinds of stuff about building fires and the way to set up the wood and stuff like that. You can let them in on your solar projects. So like if you've got solar panels and stuff like that, you can teach them about how a solar panel works. You can teach them about how to use the solar chargers and how to self-regulate the rechargeable batteries, and or how to use the solar charger, and how to use that in conjunction with some battery banks. You can teach them how to use the solar charger attached to your car. You can teach them how it basically functions so that they can utilize it for other things. Because, once again, you may be the master of all knowledge, but what if the master of all knowledge is put out of commission? Then you're going to want somebody who knows what they're doing to take over. So teach your family about all the things that you're doing with your solar panels or with your wind turbines and stuff like that, and how they can do each thing that you just take for granted that you know how to do. Also, another thing is you can give them rechargeable batteries. You can give them their own rechargeable batteries and give them a charger, and tell them, like maybe make some colored markings or something like that on their batteries, and tell them if they lose the batteries, that's it. So they have to take care of those batteries, and those are the batteries that they get for their toys, and that is their charger, and that charger better not be lost or broken. And I know that it's an ideal scenario, it's an ideal world, but I'm telling you that if the kids know that it is their own, then there's a good chance that they will at least take care of it for quite some time. And you're building a skill that they know how to put batteries in the charger, and they know how to recharge a battery and how to use those rechargeable batteries, and how long to put them on the charger, that kind of thing. So it's important that it actually is kind of important that you give them rechargeable batteries so that they can self-regulate themselves. They can self-regulate the recharge of the batteries, and now you've got someone else who knows how to do that. Even though it may seem like a basic skill, it is not quite as basic as you think. All right. As far as your projects, I know I've hit on this a little bit, but as far as your projects go, it may take a lot longer if you include your family in your projects, but it is very important that you do that. What are you doing whenever you include them in your projects, even though it's going to take you longer because you have to explain every little step that you're going to do? Even though you have to explain every little step that you're going to do, and it takes a lot longer, you are doubling up your time and spending it with them. You are actually spending time with your family, and you are getting a project finished. Think about that. So even if it takes you, let's say it takes you 1.5 times the amount of time to get something done because they keep asking you all these questions. Even if it takes you a little bit longer, you are actually doubling up things. So let's say this project would take you 1 hour, but because your children are there, it's taking you an hour and a half. It's taking you an hour and a half, okay? Well, you just lost a half hour, right? Or you can think about it as it took you an hour and a half to do a 1 hour job, and you're also getting an hour and a half of hanging out with your children. So you are getting at least 2.5 hours of useful time out of a 1 hour project and out of 1.5 hours of your time. So you actually gained time. That's what I really mean by you're doubling up your time. And one thing that you're also doing is you are building knowledge, you're building skill, and you're actually building their IQ. If you look at any IQ test, it has a whole range of things that it's testing. If what you're doing is you're building up an IQ, because an IQ is based on the things that they can understand. And as you're building things and you build this knowledge and skill level that they have, you're actually building their IQ because you're building their ability to think. So IQ is based on your ability to think, and that a lot of times is based on your skill and knowledge, and then your application of said skill and knowledge. So you are actually building knowledge, skill, and IQ, and you're also teaching them proactivity. All right, what's proactivity? It's thinking of things ahead of time before they become problems. You want to be proactive in a situation, be proactive in a solution, so you're not reactive. Reactivity brings in a lot of emotion, but if you're proactive, you can think critically about things and get things done ahead of time so that you're not stressed out and reactive later on. And have fun with this. Have fun with things. You know, just stop all the crazy prepper stuff and wrestle with your children. I do that all the time. I actually think I probably have some bruised ribs because we're always wrestling. So I'm always wrestling with my kids, and my boy is strong. I don't understand how strong he is, but I will tell you guys on air, and I'm not proud of this behavior, okay? We've definitely had talks about this. All right, so I have to say all this before I say it on the podcast. I have to say that I teach my child that he better not start a fight. But he has gotten into one fight in his life, and he tore the other person up, and it's because he is so strong. But the thing is he's also very passionate, and he's also very sensitive emotionally. So after he beat the kid up, he cried for the kid and was over there apologizing to him and really, really, really sorry for what he did. But although I can only get so much of the story, it just sounded like they were playing around. Things got a little too rough. The other kid got mad, and he ended up beating the other kid up, which I don't like when people get into fights, all right? I don't think that it's something that you need to be doing. It's stupid to get into fights. But if you have to defend yourself, you want to be able to. And he definitely defended himself that day. And it's because we wrestle, and he's so strong from having my resistance against everything that he does. And it's really fun for your children to wrestle. You just have to understand, what you're doing it for. You're not doing it so that they can get into an argument or a fight with someone. You're doing it so that they can build their strength and so that they can have fun with dad or mom. Mom, you need to wrestle with the kids too. Just make sure that you got a sports bra on because trust me, they're going to find everything that can hurt you. Also, game night. Go out, get a board game, and teach them how to play these games. Teach them Chutes and Ladders, teach them Monopoly, teach them Scrabble, teach them all these little board games, because the thing is when the power's out, that may be what you resort to for fun. And it's actually quite a bit of fun. But the thing is if they don't know how to play, you're going to spend the first 3 hours explaining the game, and they're not going to have any fun with it. Instead, when it really matters, you can just pop out the board game and say, let's play Monopoly, guys. And everybody's like, okay, let's play Monopoly. And they're running over to the game, and you guys are all playing it, and you're having a good time, instead of spending 3 hours explaining the game to them. Boy, am I glad to almost have this podcast over with. Now, I want to make one more point. We've already talked about all the how-tos and the to-dos. Now, I want you to promise me one thing. And I will promise you the same thing as well. I want you to always strive to improve yourself as a parent and a spouse. I want you to be a better father or mother to your children. I want you to be a better wife or husband to your spouse. All right? Improve yourself as a parent. Always be looking for something that you can do better so that you can be better for your children. You want your children to remember you for the time that you spent with them and for the wonderful things that you've done together. You want to be remembered by your spouse, the wonderful times that you've taken her out and enjoyed the night together. And you don't have to be taking her out to dinner and a movie, all right? Take her out to just stargaze or something and spend time with her, because I know I'm saying her, but you have to understand that I'm a guy, so my spouse is a woman. And I know that's not always true in today's age, but that is true in my house, okay? So if I say her, just understand, women, that you can think the same thing about your husband. And it all deals with what they enjoy, okay? I know by reading the 5 love languages that one of the things my wife really, really loves is time. So I try to give her time. It's very important to her. I don't have to spend anything on her. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. I don't have to spend a lot of money on her. I have to spend a lot of time on her. And that's what she's going to love me for, and that's what she's going to remember me for. So always give them your time. And I know that it's kind of cheesy, and it's not the typical preparedness thing, but if you want to learn about how to talk to your spouse and how to understand their needs and their wants, I would definitely suggest the 5 love languages, the book, the 5 love languages. And if I think about it, I know that this is 2 weeks in advance, so if I think about it, I will try to put a link to the 5 love languages, in my show notes, okay? So those show notes are theprepperpodcast.com/032. Once again, that is theprepperpodcast.com/032. And with that, this is Ken Jensen of theprepperpodcast.com, teaching you strategies on self-reliance so that you can build a more resilient and more enjoyable life. Have a wonderful week. This is Ken, signing out.